We have everything, literally everything behind feature flags. Right now we have feature flags to help ourselves, to help customers. Like they just want to make some really cool apps that people love. They want to have good reviews. They want to make money. So in the end, everybody wants the same thing.
The actual device running it is like a device in somebody's pocket.
And if they had the new stuff behind the feature flag, it would have affected a handful of people, and then they turned it off, and it would never become a big thing.
Hi, I'm Paul Bigger, founder of Circle CI.
I'm Edith Harva, CEO and co-founder at LaunchDarkly.
And you're listening to Be Continuous, a podcast about continuous delivery and software development.
You can get in touch with us anytime at our Twitter handle @ContinuousCast.
The show is brought to you by Heavybit. To learn more, visit heavybit.com. And while you're there, check out their library, home to great educational talks from other developer company founders and industry leaders.
Okay, so what is the thing that you like least about continuous delivery?
So I could start off because that's actually I feel passionate about what I like least about CI, which is I hate setup.
Okay.
Every single time I've ever done a CI system, it takes me like a day.
Mm-hmm.
It's always like a day. It always feels like it should take like an hour or like half an hour because it's always like, oh yeah, I know what I'm doing. I wanted to just build and do the stuff, but it's just like it always takes way longer than I want.
This is literally why I started Circle CI.
And I would say that is by far every time my least favorite thing. It's always like getting in the way of coding. It's always starting a project, and it's always like I don't get to start because instead I am like installing agents or trying to figure out why like a connection or an authentication problem or something like that. And so it's very very passionate for me that it's the setup costs.
The first time that I started marketing Circle CI, the email that I sent out to our initial list was like, set up your CI in 20 seconds.
Yeah.
And that was massively effective.
Yeah.
Was it true though?
In about 40% of cases.
How about the rest of 60?
It took, less than an hour. It was pretty straightforward to get it set up. There's no agents to install. We have infrastructure as well, so it was nice and straightforward.
Well, how about you? What's the thing you like least?
The least I like when there's a new version of Xcode or a new SDK, and then it starts. You have to update the Mac hardware, you have to update the agent, then things start failing. Then if you have one app on one SDK version and another app on another version, things might start failing even worse. So it's becoming a huge mess.
So I feel a lot of this pain. I feel like as fellow CI providers, we like this is one of the nightmares of like your build machine or your build image has to update because the technology updates all the time. But then you fuck over the existing customers who were perfectly happy with how things were working.
Yeah, and people expect in the next like 24 hours.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It's
like
there.
As soon as you make it, it's like we had a process where building our Mac image took like 3 days, and so there was no way we were going to get anything done in the next 24 hours.
Well, so Paul, now's a great time for our guests to introduce themselves.
Let's do it.
Hey, I'm Simina Pasat. I'm a program manager in Visual Studio Mobile Center here at Microsoft.
Hi, I'm Joshua Weber. I'm a program manager here at Microsoft. I'm working right now on the Mobile Center team, but I also own the Hockey app product as we're basically running them in parallel. So.
Yeah, and we're recording this from Microsoft Build, Microsoft's big developer conference in Seattle, Washington. We're on the conference floor, and there's just a lot of excitement here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the conference has been really exciting so far.
As people who are not traditionally in the Microsoft world, it's funny to see how different everything is in kind of Microsoft land, but also it sounds like quite a lot of it is the same. But from a mobile perspective, what is different in Microsoft world than for us Mac lovers?
So I think the interesting take for me is, and I've been around at Microsoft for 5 years, so I guess I can say that I've been on the inside seeing the transition, and I would say like we really do feel that any developer wherever you are, it is really like the motto. Like we've stopped making decisions and we've stopped having this conversation about like Windows or Microsoft first, and instead it's really pivoted to really wherever developers are. And so when it comes to the mobile world, like we evaluate the mobile world, we see where the majority of the developers are, and that's where we lead off. And so we always lead with the largest groups of developers. We're always trying to find the largest value proposition that we can provide to those developers. And I would say that hasn't always been the quite the way that we've done decision making, but it definitely has been for the last few years here at Microsoft. And so I would say that's the part that I think is starting to come out at things like the Build conference, where it's really you're starting to see that in the actions that we take.
And so the CI/CD that you guys sort of advocate and that your customers use, is that roughly the same as the rest of the ecosystem?
I think we took a really very non-Microsofty approach when we started, because we were like, we want to meet the developers where they are today. And we said mobile developers are today on GitHub and are mostly developing iOS in Swift or Objective-C. So first iteration of the product while we were in preview was connect with your GitHub repositories, build and distribute your iOS apps, your Objective-C Swift apps, and then we started looking at Android Java, at Xamarin, and at other solutions as well.
Gotcha. And Xamarin is now part of that whole thing since the acquisition?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, I think we kind of merged with the Xamarin team. It's been really exciting to see, like, especially I would say how passionate the Xamarin community has been as they've kind of folded into the Microsoft stuff. And like the Xamarin solution is just like fantastically incredible. like you can actually write like native UI and then have it like deployed. It actually brings all this consistency across all your platforms. It's like it's really exciting to see like the stuff. And so we've really had the excitement and maybe some new energy. Xamarin was an external company, and so I think they've brought in a lot of like a very different perspective to how we're doing the development. So it's been really fun to work with those guys and partner up with them.
Yeah, I remember last year I was at Build and they announced that Xamarin was now available to everybody, and there's just like people were literally cheering.
Yeah.
Like there's just so much excitement around that amongst the developer community.
Xamarin is a C# solution, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and
correct.
so it's interesting that you folks were doing non-Microsofty technologies, and like it was the external company that brought in the C sharpness to mobile.
Mm-hmm.
And then Hockey was an acquisition as well, right?
Yeah.
Hockey App was an acquisition, I believe.
It was in December 2014, I think.
Yeah, I think maybe like 2.5 years.
2.5 years ago, I think.
Was that before your time, or how did that?
No, it was actually right at my time. So when the Hockey App team, I actually joined directly with the team, like when it merged in. And so that was really exciting too, especially with the popularity and how common Hockey App was. I would say they, especially for that iOS distribution market, like they really focused in at the starting days. They were very much an early innovator in that space for distribution. And so it was really interesting to see like this like long history of development and this long engagement with customers that they had built up kind of over time.
And for Hockey App is so exciting because most of their customers are people that we at Microsoft until now we didn't have contact with.
Yeah.
So it's
because
just
they're so small.
Because they're small, because they're just not traditional Microsoft developers, right? They don't use C#. There's many smaller companies, and it's just so exciting to work with them.
Well, what do you think is the difference between the traditional Microsoft developer and not a traditional Microsoft developer?
That's a good question.
I think it has a lot to do with just the stack that you end up. I mean, everybody talks about like the platform stack that you pick, and like there's very definitely a Microsoft stack with a lot of tooling and a lot of richness. But it's not the only option out there. There's a lot of other stacks, especially with the change in mobile development to the kind of these like brand new platforms for Android and iOS, where they were brand new platforms. Nobody really knew at the start what they were doing. Like I talked to the founder of Hockey App, Thomas, and things like that. He talks about like being one of the first people to actually have the original iPhone, and actually his co-founder Andreas was actually developing an iPhone app before they had even published the APIs.
Wow.
And so like being there like right at the thing, like nobody really understood the new stacks, and so like there's these entire ecosystems of tools and stuff that have built up into those communities. And so I think for a while like the communities were very kind of separate and maybe independent. And I think what's been happening over time is that these communities have been merging back together, right? Like it turns out that we all have the same problems to solve, and that innovations into one set of tooling or area, something like CI or CD or this like DevOps movement, is starting to, I think, bring these communities together, where it's not so much just like you make one platform choice and then that means that you have like 7 other tool choices that just become obvious because that's the platform you are. And I think there's starting to become flexibility now where you can actually go out and pick the best tool for the job. The tools actually support multiple platforms. I think that's actually really great. I think that it's bringing a lot more diversity to these different platforms, where developers aren't just kind of like locked in because they made a platform choice at the start to all of the rest of the tooling, and now that they can actually kind of experiment and see some of the different perspectives that other people bring.
Yeah, and in fact, Microsoft developer or non-Microsoft, in the end, they have the same goal. Like they just want to make some really cool apps that people love. They want to have good reviews. They want to make money. So in the end, everybody wants the same thing.
Yeah. They have very much the same problems, right? Like we all hate
the app is
CI
crashing
setup,
for
right?
everybody.
The app is crashing for everybody. That's right.
So from the from the perspective of CD in the mobile space, I feel that there's a lot of a weirdness specifically around the App Store, and you mentioned reviews and the fact that there's this the app review process. How does that affect continuous delivery for people in the mobile space?
It affects it quite a lot, and that's why we think, because you have to wait forever to get your app reviewed, or not forever, but quite long. It's really valuable to have a lot of iterations, and we guide our product a lot around the build, measure, learn methodology. So we really think that once people start building the app, they want to test it with early testers, with their internal teams, maybe with alpha testers. They want to get feedback. They want to measure how people are using it. And then at some point start doing deployments to App Store and then get reviews and so on. And even once they deploy to the App Store and the app is out there, it doesn't mean that their build, measure, learn stops, right? They still are doing alpha testing. All the games are always having some betas out there. So we guide our product a lot around just making this continuous iteration cycle really, really easy for mobile developers, and just making them just immediately, not have to wait a few hours or a few days, but just shipping the apps as soon as possible in the hands of their testers.
Mm-hmm.
So I was formerly at TripIt, which was the number one travel app. So it was something we were very serious about, is that you're always iterating. And you try to get stuff in the hands of users, whoever they are, as soon as possible, because user feedback is everything.
Yeah, and I think in the world of web apps, it's much easier to do it because you have so many tools. But for mobile, you actually have to take the app and put it on their device, which makes it a bit more challenging.
Yeah, I always found that was the biggest paradigm shift for me, was always when you move from web to mobile. In the web world, you own everything. Like, you own the server that the web server is running on. You own the back-end database systems. You can ultimately you could just reach out and SSH into them, right, and actually detect them. But when you go into the mobile world, there's so much of that experience now that's just outside of your control, right? Like, the actual device running it is like a device in somebody's pocket. Like, you don't have any influence over that, any control. Like, you can't push stuff there. Or the app stores where you're actually delivering mechanisms. It's not like your own server you're deploying to. It's some external system that's controlled by Apple or Microsoft or Google. And so you lose a lot of that kind of ability to control and influence it. And I think for mobile, the transition shift where you now have to start working with these external systems instead of your own systems where you have so much more influence and stuff, I think results in a lot more kind of thinking about what the experience is, trying to define those interfaces with those external systems to how to work best.
So I'm not really sure I see such a stark difference. The way that I see it is that both mobile and web have essentially two-phase. I don't want to say two-phase commits because that's another thing, but there are two steps in getting code in front of the customers. The first is getting the bundle that includes that code into customers' hands, and in that case, it's the App Store or it's deployment to the server. But the second phase is actually enabling the code. Feature flags, obviously, what Edith's company does.
Thanks for wearing your shirt today.
Yeah, no. No worries. For once, you are wearing a Launch Darkly t-shirt. It's a thing we do. Never mind. If people are taking that strategy of the code doesn't change until you flip the flag, then the fact that there's an App Store review or just code review on your web process on your web deployment process doesn't really look all that different.
Interesting.
That's what my company Launch Darkly allows you to do, is kind of separate out deployment from visibility. So you can push a build to the apps, to the App Store, and then selectively turn on features or turn them off if they're performing poorly.
It's an interesting idea. You're kind of saying that by basically integrating in the kind of feature flag type capability, that you a little bit kind of return that control back to where you can change the deployment to actually a little bit on your terms, as opposed to just the actual deployment to the store. Yeah. So it kind of returns that a little bit to, it turns the same, I push the package to the web and then enable it, and I push the package to devices and then enable it.
And I think for React Native world, it's even a bit more easy because you have technologies which really do updates in the app without having to modify the binary, and you're code push or other similar technologies. You just go in the app and you get a new update, and you had no idea that you had a new update. You just have a new package.
I remember this. There was this giant fiasco a couple of years back. You might remember about the Amazon Kindle app that deleted all of your books, and so Amazon launched it for iOS, and then had to get like special Apple permission to launch a new version of the same app like the next day and get a fast track through. And if they had the new stuff behind the feature flag, it would have affected a handful of people, and then they turned it off, and it would never become a big thing.
Yeah, and that's an approach we take with the product that we are working on all the time. We have everything, literally everything behind feature flags.
Oh, cool.
Do you have features around helping customers do the same?
No, right
thing?
now, no.
Okay.
Right now we have feature flags to help ourselves to help customers.
I'd love to hear more about that. So how do you have everything behind a feature flag, and what's kind of Microsoft's process around that?
I think Microsoft process is very different across different teams. So in our team, the way we run the product is that we have a support chat window in the product itself. So people ask us for features and things they want to try. So many times we just take one of the asks that appears every time and we implement it. And then we ask the users that have asked for it, hey, can you give it a try? Is this what you expect? And then we have a few iterations on that feature flag capability. And then once it meets the bar, we just release it to everybody. And if things go wrong, we have a way to make sure that we don't delete everybody's apps or such things.
What is the process when you decide that that's not going to become a feature?
Many times we just shelf it for a while, like we just don't release it. Sometimes we...
So you have like hundreds of like half-implemented features behind a feature flag that touches like one customer.
We didn't start the product so long ago, we didn't get time to get to hundreds.
Oh.
But it's very good for iterations and for just finding out, if what we are working on for a few weeks, it's actually something that we should invest more months into, or if we just should call it a nice experiment for now and rediscuss it at a later date.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you don't go back and delete those features.
We do at times.
Okay.
We'll do like staged rollouts sometimes where we'll push a feature just to a few customers, especially since we have that intercom technique where they can actually talk to us. It's very easy to collect people who are definitely interested
do you
in the
actually
feature.
use intercom?
Yeah.
Yeah, we use it actually pretty heavily.
Yeah, intercom is awesome.
That way we can actually collect up like a small set of customers that are actually interested in this feature. And then we can actually deploy it out to those folks early. And so it's like a little bit of a limited release that gives us a little bit of a time to kind of evaluate the initial response from those customers. At times they're just happy, and so we roll it out fuller. At times they maybe feel like it's not the right solution, and so we'll just continue to iterate usually to get it. I would say it's been maybe rarer for us where we've decided to abandon a scenario. I think that we tend to be pretty tenacious in that like once we take on a scenario for a customer or feel that this is a real customer pain point, I think we tend to be pretty like, let's keep at it. We'll keep iterating. We'll keep redefining the product until it is. I think it feels like maybe hard for us to give up on a user scenario and just be like, no, that's not something that we're going to solve.
So it sounds like in that case, the user scenarios that you start to implement must be pretty fully baked at that point.
Yeah, I would say so. Like I think we usually feel like we're pretty confident by the time we take on a user scenario because it is pretty costly.
You mean by the time you start to like actually implement it?
Yeah, when you start like actually implementing, actually spending dev resources, I think we like to feel like we're pretty confident on that.
And so do you have some phases before that where you're trying to invalidate your hypothesis before it becomes a user story?
Yeah, I would say that's always part of our process. I would say it's always something that we're trying to get better at. Making product decisions is difficult, and trying to evaluate where you spend your resources is always a hardship. So it's always something we strive to improve, but we do try to go through a phase in the start where we understand the right features to go after and the right investments to make. And so we do things like customer interviews and like even paper prototyping or customer development. We really try to do a lot of that customer engagement where we just like talk to customers, understand their pain points.
What you're saying is there's many places for a feature to die before you actually implement it.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
It dies so many times.
For example, we just tried something new yesterday, which is that we had like a little mini dev day where we actually brought in a lot of the build developers directly into the Microsoft campus yesterday. And then we just asked them questions about upcoming features, upcoming pain points to try to identify. And that's like a great way where we can try to filter out some of those scenarios or pain points that maybe aren't worth further investigating, or try to get a little bit more confidence in our own decisions that the ones that we are going to invest in are the right solutions for us.
Tell me about it. You laughed when you said you've killed many features. Do you want to?
So with Mobile Center, we started less than 1 year ago.
Yeah.
So, and we have Hockey app and Xamarin Test Cloud before. So Mobile Center is the new generation. So obviously we have a lot of things to catch up with. And we have also a lot of customers to talk to. So I think we had some good learnings around things we thought would be useful. For instance, personally, we wanted to offer some experience around unit test. And we thought we can do really MVP and see what people are saying. And we found out that the MVP is actually not enough for people. So then we decided, okay, right now we don't have resources to invest heavily in everything what we should do. So for now, let's shelf it for a while. And when we can invest in it fully, we should go with a full-blown solution, because just an MVP is not enough for people.
Yeah, that's
too minimal.
That's always hard. I mean, that's
not viable enough.
Yeah.
that's the hardest thing of as a product manager is, I love MVPs, but when are they just sometimes too M and not V?
Exactly.
And so did you leave the unviable thing, the feature in, and some customers are still using it? And
we left it for some customers that really wanted it and that still provide feedback. So they said for them it's fine for now, but we made sure not to roll it out to further customers, because you don't want to set the expectations and then to take it away.
Well, one of the places we end up when that happens is we have it rolled out to a bunch of customers, and then more customers hear about it by word of mouth, or people tweet about it, and then it's like we're in this awkward situation of should we then roll it out to another customer, especially if there's migration involved to the newer version that we want to do later, as it ends up being really fucking awkward.
I think now we have kind of the benefit that we are in preview. So we have still a lot of space to experiment, and people actually are really excited that we experiment a lot, and they understand. Nice. They're always, give me access to this, I want to try it out, it's fine if you take it away, just I want to see.
I did a webinar with Ed Blankenship, who runs another group, and in it he said, like, hey, I actually have all these feature flags of new features, and people were so excited. They're like, I want to turn all this stuff on.
Yeah. I really like enabling allowing users to turn it on themselves.
That's what Visual Studio has now.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, nice.
We've actually done that same self-enablement process with Hockey App. So we started in Hockey App what we were calling a preseason program, because it's Hockey App, so everything is hockey themed.
Right. Yeah.
So preseason was the early adopter program, and I found like it was very successful because it allowed the customers who want to be with the latest, who maybe have a little bit more of the tolerance for some of the unease or like the experimental type features. And so it gave them a way that they could self-opt in to being on the latest and then seeing all the stuff. And I found that by allowing your kind of users to self-select themselves into that community, I think it actually worked out really well, that they can try out these features in advance.
I think what I've found is it makes them feel a lot more community.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I'm curious, how big is the community? And so when you have one of these features, how many people are we talking who enable it?
I think for the preseason for Hockey App, I think it's a couple of thousand.
Okay. And how many total Hockey App users?
I don't think we usually share the total numbers.
Gotcha. Okay.
But, yeah, I would say it's a much smaller. It's a minority of the population. It's not a major segment of the population.
Joshua, I love puns, so what are some other code names that you could share from Hockey App?
Oh, so I guess I think we have like our internal environments. We also pick up the same thing, so we call them like training for you're practicing. I think we had the preseason program.
We had the Rink, which is the external web app. It's a Rink.
Yeah, I think the command line tool that we were using is Puck. So like
we have the logo, which is 3 pucks on top of each other.
So they definitely tried to keep with that Hockey App theme.
Do you have a goon somewhere?
No, we don't. That's
and the Mac app is a Zamboni. Like the logo for the Mac app is a Zamboni for the eyes.
That's pretty cute.
So I really liked your idea actually about bringing the feature flag concept, I think, into that CI/CD. I think, at least for myself, I usually think of CI/CD. I get very caught up in the build infrastructure and the actual deployment of the package. But in reality, we should take a step back and really look at the whole value chain there, right? Which is, you do a code commit as a developer to have a new feature, and then it needs to get into your customer's hands, and you want that to really feed back into your cycle.
Yeah.
the separation of CI and feature flags is a little bit unnecessary in a certain extent. That your one is an attempt at like getting the code into production. And it's like you've got this branch in your Git repo, which is essentially the feature flag, but it's an incredibly coarse feature flag. And if you have people who, and I've definitely heard of people doing this, who do feature flags by Git branches, and it ends up that it isn't possible for them to have multiple axes in which the feature flags are happening. And so I think it's interesting that the rapid delivery process, I think, is sort of based on or sort of emerged from this idea of continuous integration. Like in the old meaning, before CI meant build servers, when CI meant we start a new branch and then we merge it like as soon as humanly possible. It's sort of, we call that feature flags now, I guess. Well, CI name means build servers.
Well, thanks for joining us today. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share?
It's been fantastic talking to you guys. Like
it was
I said,
really fun.
I really like these different opinions from different communities, bringing everything together.
Yeah, it's been wonderful having you here.
Yeah, the collaboration's always exciting.
I loved hearing about how Microsoft builds software because it's always fun to talk to the people who are building software for people who build software.
Yeah, it's very very Inception-like, where you're deploying your stuff with your own stuff or your own CI systems building your stuff.
It's also fun for us because every team does it differently. If I talk with friends from other teams, completely different approach. Best practices are always there, but not everybody does the same thing. So it's always nice to talk to, even with people inside Microsoft.
Yeah, I think there's this perception that there's a Microsoft way, but what you're saying is there's more different teams that build it different ways.
It's a huge company, right? So it's very difficult to converge all the people to do exact same thing.
Yeah.
That's a good note to end on. Thank you again for coming by.
Thank you.
Yeah,
That's great.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of To Be Continuous, brought to you by Heavybit and hosted by me, Paul Bigger of Circle CI, and Edith Harbaugh of Launch Darkly.
To learn more about Heavybit, visit heavybit.com. While you're there, check out their library, home to great educational talks from other developer company founders and industry leaders.